and welcome to Nashville Savvy. We are live today, election day. It's finally here. I know it's been a really long road since general election. Now we're into runoffs. Of course, there's going to be we're going to be determining who's going to be the mayor. We're going to be determining 4 of the 5 at-large council member seats. We're also having 3 district races. And it's going to be a wild ride. And a little bit farther to like the Inglewood area, they're going to be voting on state rep, which that's going to be an interesting outcome as well. So saddle up. We're going to be talking a little bit about all of that and a little bit more during today's show. So first, we're going to start. We have some new music. I don't know if we have this segment, but lately is, do we have our new music there, G? Oh, we don't, but our transition music, we'll get a little taste of the other sections today. But basically, we're walking into today's election day with about 71,000 votes already cast in the early voting. Now, this is unprecedented. This is a high number for early voting turnout. And to be honest with you, nobody really knows what that's going to look like, what that actually means for today's turnout, because we're not used to having this surge in early turnout voting. Usually about 45% of people who make up the total votes come and cast their ballot on election day. So it's hard to tell if we're going to have, 45%, that many people, almost 70,000 people show up today, or if it's just going to be a little bit lower of a count because people have already voted early. Going into it, we're also getting mixed signals from different pundits and different people's campaigns as to whether or not this is going to be some type of landslide victory or if it's going to be super close. Me personally, I think it's going to be a nail biter. I think it's going to be coming down right to the wire. We do have a clip from Alice Rolli, who is already out and about this morning, way before I even had myself together after getting our pieces out this morning. So we're going to play a clip from her.
Hey, this is Alice Rolli. It is election day today, Thursday, September 14th. We started the day up in Goodlettsville at Cantrell's Market, visiting with Jimmy Cantrell and Mayor Rusty Tennant. Been over in White Creek to vote with Stephanie Johnson from our team, and shout out to Stephanie. It is her birthday today. So if it's your birthday or not, we hope you'll come to the polls. This part of the campaign has been sort of hyper overdrive. Every day we've had 3 or 4 events, been on media, and we've been doing media calls all day today too. So just make sure to get the word out. And tonight we hope to see you at 7 o'clock at Plaza Mariachi. Anytime after the polls close.
It looks like we stalled a little bit there. It looks like it cut off a little bit there, but she is inviting everybody to come out to Plaza Mariachi. That's where she's going to have her election night party. Of course, the pamphleteer is going to be live tweeting as we get numbers from the precincts and start adding them all together. You know that it takes 51%, obviously, to win this election, over 51%. And we will be live tweeting all of the updates as we get closer and closer to determining who is going to take over as the mayor of Nashville. Now, when we're looking at the demographics of who showed up in early voting, it's almost 2-to-1 Democrats showing up to, it's actually over 2-to-1 Democrats showing up compared to Republicans. And there was about 7,000 people who are undetermined or independents who voted in the early voting. But that doesn't necessarily determine if that's how many people voted Democrat or Republican, because in the end, some of those Democrats notoriously pull a lever for a more moderate candidate. In this race, it does come off that Alice Rolli is the more moderate Republican. And of course, Freddie O'Connell is the progressive Democrat. Now, of all of those votes, about 50,000 were cast by people over the age of 46. That's also an indication that those voters might have voted a little bit more in favor of a moderate candidate. But to be honest with you, it's hard to determine at this point. I've talked to a plethora of people, not only people who are on the campaign trail alongside the candidates, but also regular Nashvillians and all sorts of districts across the county who, were very surprised to see how many Alice Rolli signs were out there, especially in some of these places where the same people who put an Alice Rolli sign out in their yard also have some more of the more progressive candidates signs in their yard who are running for council. So I think that this race is far from being easily determined, especially at this point. Maybe it'll become a little bit more clear once we start seeing the numbers roll in, but I really do think it's going to be a nail biter tonight. When we're looking at the council races, of course, we're going to be choosing for the 4 at-large members. The at-large members, even though they do represent the entire Davidson County populace, they don't hold any more weight as far as their vote or their influence over the council. Their vote counts the same as a regular districted council member. They are just taking into account the constituents from all across the county and not just the constituents from within their district. And of course, we have the 3 districted races. I'm going to just addle up a little bit here. Sorry, guys. The 3 districted races that will be determined by tonight's election. When we're looking forward, we will be putting the councils together. I think it's once they get sworn in, we'll see them meet. I think it's at either the end of October or early November, if I'm remembering correctly. And we'll start to get a feel of how the new council is going to get along. If you don't recall, about half of the council, they were not eligible to run again because they termed out. So we already knew that it was going to be basically an entirely new council. And as we've seen a couple upsets. If you remember, Zach Young, he lost his seat to a more conservative candidate, which was a surprise. And then we honestly really don't know who's going to be sticking around and who's going to be, and what these new voices that are coming into council will actually be like until we see what they do on the council floor, which we all know gets a little bit crazy, which is exactly why we have a section in our Nashville Savvy podcast called Metro Mayhem. So please tune in tonight on our Twitter for our live feed. I will also be heading over for a little while to the Alice Rolli election night campaign, but go to @RealPamphleteer on Twitter for that live update in your feed, where you don't have to actually just be glued to your television. We'll just tweet it on out and you can go about your night. Going on to the next thing, I did want to bring up the last week's interview with General Scrimeti, the Attorney General of Tennessee. It was his 1-year anniversary. He served 1 year in office. And if you recall, it is an 8-year term that he will be serving. So he will see he will be serving under 2 different governors, since we will have a new governor after Governor Lee terms out in a few more years. So it's going to be interesting to see how over the next 7 years things will be evolving. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up about that interview that kind of snuck in towards the end of it, and you might have missed it, was how he laid out the problem of elite corporate, I guess you would call it, I wouldn't want to call it like a monopoly, but how they use the court system when it comes to legislation. So basically, what we've been seeing in Nashville, Tennessee, though we have a very Republican, it's a super majority Republican legislature in the state, which is determined, of course, by the voters in Tennessee, they pass a lot of laws that end up in court, which is a way that is another way to kind of check the system. Instead of voting or appealing to the general population. Sorry, I'm stumbling on my words, guys. My head's all over the place. It's crazy this election day. Instead of appealing to the general population and trying to vote people in to pass the laws that you want, what they're doing instead is they're not appealing to the public. They're not trying to change who's in office. They're literally just suing the state every time the legislature passes something that they don't like. And I thought that was a really interesting point about democracy and our democratic process that General Scrimeti brought up. So if you want to check that out, of course, that was the podcast that we aired last week. So it'll be right in your underneath this podcast once we're done here. So please check that out afterwards. Next, we're going to go to Local Corner to talk about somebody that I really like. I'm going to just play the clip first, and then we'll introduce her.
Like street lights painting into some kind of calico. I ain't got nothing left to say. I think I'm done with giving it all away. Oh, we took our chances, we had our fun, falling in and out of lonely love.
All right, so that was Kate Boeck, and I'm not gonna lie, I ran into her by happenstance listening. I was out the other night, and I went to dinner with a friend, and we stumbled upon her playing out and about in Nashville, Tennessee, and she really spoke to me and my friends' 90s soul. She's a combination of a little bit of Jewel, a little bit of Alanis Morissette, a little bit of Norah Jones. She's so soothing, and I just had to add her to our Local Corner spot today and highlight her because I think that you would really enjoy her if you're into that type of thing. Her set list was made up of all the best 90s songs ever. So that's somebody that you should definitely check out here in Nashville. When I was speaking to her, she does have a son that she is homeschooling, and she also is looking for a residency to stick around and not have to necessarily go on tour all over the place so that she could stay in Nashville with her son. And she's also writing the music for a musical based on Ayn Rand, which is a really interesting. I have a hot take on Ayn Rand. I know that Republicans or maybe conservatives do like Ayn Rand. I'm not saying that I don't like Ayn Rand. I think that Ayn Rand and her books sometimes leave out what I think is one of the most important parts, which is God. So her perspectives, though they do speak to this individualism, and I do believe in most of what she says about that. I do believe that she kind of leaves out some of the most important parts of the puzzle, which is the overall, there is a larger force at play as well. But she's writing, strangely, a musical based on her dystopian novel. So she's an interesting person. You should definitely check her out. That's Kate Boeck. You can find her on Instagram and enjoy her and give her some love here in Nashville, Tennessee. Next, we're going to go into Metro Mayhem, and I know that we have some music for this.
Metro Mayhem.
Oh my goodness. And it is a car crash when we do Metro Mayhem, because in Nashville, Tennessee, we have politicians who can't help themselves, and they say all sorts of ridiculous things, including a council member who is going to be in the new Metro Council, but also has served in the Metro Council since 2019. She is the youngest member, and her name is Sandra Sepulveda. She is a advocate for the Latina community, and she tweeted out, I have a series of tweets that she tweeted out the other day at Alice Rolli. She was saying, oh, isn't it interesting, it's interesting to me that Alice Rolli plans on having her watch party at Plaza Mariachi when I haven't seen her in the Latinx community all cycle. Now, Alice Rolli, for her part, replied back, because clearly that's not true, and she basically pointed out all the places that she's gone and visited Latino communities throughout Nashville. And of course, in true Sepulveda fashion, she is young, so I will give her the benefit of the doubt, I suppose. But she goes, well, my list is longer, but I missed you at all of them. Who very childish tweets coming from Councilwoman Sandra Sepulveda. So that is our Metro Mayhem for the day. As we walk into Election Day, I personally don't vote until election day, and that's because I like to see the turnout. I like to show up to the poll. I like to look around and see how many people are coming in and out of the polling place. Of course, I live over in East Nashville. In the area I live in, honestly, there's not a lot of turnout in these elections. In fact, in mayoral elections, there's very little turnout at all. We have upwards of, I think it's about 400, and I think it might be around 480,000 registered voters here in Davidson County. And we're lucky if we can cross the 100,000 mark for votes to determine the mayor of one of the major cities in America, Nashville, Tennessee. So so today I think that we're going to break that. Hopefully we'll break 100,000. Last time we only had about 90,000 voters show out and vote Mayor Cooper into office. Of course, you may recall too that he's only served one term. He ran on promises not to increase the taxes, and then of course, well, there's two sides to this story. Of course, he gets into office and raises the taxes, the property taxes, 34%. Of course, we did have the March tornadoes. We also had the onset of COVID, and we also had a couple other things that they had to clean up as far as the Metro City budget. You do know that we are more in debt than the entire state of Tennessee. So he did increase the property taxes 34%. Of course, people will say that that's not really that much because we already had super low taxes, but it does create a precedent, a very, very terrifying precedent if you are a property owner or if you're a taxpayer in Nashville, Tennessee. Alice Rolli, for her part, Freddie O'Connell has definitely articulated some skepticism as to Alice Rolli deciding to take the taxpayer pledge where she will not be raising the taxes. I think that that's a major, she stuck to that. She did not back down from that pledge. She doubled down on it as soon as she got into the runoffs. And I think that that will have some impact to many of the voters here in Davidson County. Of course, we will determine that today at the polling place. I hope that you guys make it out there. Perhaps I'll even do some live, not just live tweeting, but maybe a couple live videos when I'm out and about as we're getting the numbers in. It'll be, if it's going to be how I think it's going to be, it'll be a nail biter. But please check us out. Of course, my personal handle is Megan Lee Writes. That's on Twitter. That's on Instagram. You can follow me there. But also please follow Pamphleteer, Real Pamphleteer on Twitter tonight so that we are during our live tweets. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next week with a new mayor determined. So saddle up, guys. Thanks for joining me.